We're finally here. After nearly 30 years, Kirby's making his jump to 3D. It's taken the series a lot to get to this point, tons of solid 2D platformers releasing over the years. So before Kirby enters an entirely new era for the series, I want to look back at the games that have truly made the series what it is. And what better place to start than Kirby Super Star Ultra, the DS remake of the original Kirby Super Star on the Super Nintendo that in actuality was my very first Kirby game when Super Star Ultra first released. Hello everyone, this is the RPG Monger, and today I want to talk about the perfect remake that is Kirby Super Star Ultra. Now before I get into the nitty-gritty of Super Star Ultra, it is worth talking about the game it's remaking, Kirby Superstar. Owing its uniqueness to the creator of the Kirby series, Masahiro Sakurai, Superstar brought in a lot of innovation that's become common in modern-day Kirby games. For instance, Superstar would greatly expand on Kirby's copy abilities, adding new input-based attacks to each one that played like a basic fighting game to a certain extent, fitting considering the next game Sakurai worked on. And with 24 separate copy abilities, or 18 subtracting temporary ones, Superstar opens up a whole world of experimentation. I know in the pause menu there's a guide for the one that's currently equipped, but in my experience, just messing around with different button combinations to see what a new copy ability is capable of was always the best. Not to mention, with this new added diversity of attacks, this opens up the game's capability for copy ability puzzles far more, whether it be the quick bursts of speed with the jet ability or the range of attacks with other abilities. And on an even more basic level than that, from the moment you create a save file in Superstar, it's apparent that this isn't like other Kirby games. Rather than revolving around a singular set campaign, Superstar consists of multiple games in a sense. Only to access everything, there's a fair bit you've got to unlock simply by playing the games. Not even getting into the actual games themselves, this is already such a good design philosophy to base a game around. Hell knows it too. There may not be another Kirby exactly like Superstar, but they've been implementing unlockable modes for the past few Kirby games now. After all, nothing drives you to complete a game quite like more games to play. Beyond that, there's yet another important aspect of Kirby games that Superstar pioneered: multiplayer. While you may take it for granted now, the smooth multiplayer found in a lot of modern Kirby games today all had their foundations in Superstar. I always really liked how the second player slot was taken up by the enemy corresponding to the copy ability used to create it. Even if you're the second player, there's still a great deal of variety with all the enemies you can become. Hell, you could even be a mini-boss with Suplex or Hammer. And when it comes to Superstar Ultra, it'd bring over all these integral aspects just as they were in the original, in some cases even expanding on things. I'll talk about the new modes in a bit, though just with the multiplayer, Superstar Ultra made use of the DS to bring multiplayer to every aspect of the game, including its additions. What's more, if only one person had a copy of the game, they weren't out of luck, because Superstar Ultra supported DS download play. The only issue with that is it's a bit limited in more ways than one, since rather than being able to access the entire game, if you use DS download, you're restricted to only the first mode. What's worse, if you're the unlucky one that doesn't have a copy, you've got to look at your friend's DS to even play the game. I swear, you didn't have the quintessential late 2000s childhood if you weren't out in the summer heat trying to play Superstar Ultra, all the while attempting to see through the sun glaring off of your friend's screen. If anything, I guess it must have driven more people to actually get the full game at least. So on that note, let's go past the surface level and into the actual game itself. Starting with Spring Breeze and followed by Dynablade, Superstar's first two modes serve to acclimate you to the game's additions to the Kirby formula. In fact, Spring Breeze is actually just a simplified remake of the first Kirby game. This works great in a number of ways, as if you're new to Kirby like I was when I first played this game, it's the perfect entry point to its gameplay, because like this mode's title suggests, it doesn't get much easier than this. It's 4 levels providing the player with ample opportunity to become accustomed to the reinvented copy abilities, and maintaining the visual style set by the original Superstar, Superstar Ultra remakes its mix between 2D sprites and CG graphics perfectly. Like the game's addition of multiplayer, this may not be something you think about nowadays, but Superstar donned CG graphics back when they were still a new thing, games like Donkey Kong Country adding a decent amount to the original's development schedule as Sakurai decided to scrap all existing art in favor of creating said graphics. Don't get me wrong, they look pretty good in the original Superstar, though Ultra makes use of the DS's capabilities to push them to the next level. I remember even when I was younger, I'd see some of the elaborate backgrounds Ultra brought in and wish Kirby could go to them as part of the level, what with how surreal some of them are. That's not the only part that was improved graphically either, just take Ultra's cutscenes, the game once again taking advantage of the DS to make some real solid stuff for the time. Even looking back at them today, they honestly still hold up pretty well. The one at the end of Spring Breeze never fails to drop a metric ton of nostalgia on me, but I'm getting ahead of myself. In a way, Spring Breeze is actually easier than the original Kirby's Dream Land, since with copy abilities, the mode's bosses get annihilated. good. If anything, that one room with the bottomless pit where you have to fly up has taken more lives from me than Spring Breeze's bosses ever have. Then in Dynablade, it's another short and sweet adventure, only this time it's entirely new. To make it stand out compared to Spring Breeze, levels are separated via a world map in the style of classic platformers like Mario 3. Kirby even brought in a roaming mini-boss on the map, and in the levels themselves, the mode still serves to ease the player into Superstar's gameplay, only now more of the game's unique copy abilities are brought in along with more puzzles in the levels. One thing I always loved in Superstar is how the game rewards you for checking each level's nooks and crannies, whether the reward be an invincibility candy or a secret button to unlock a bonus stage. It's even better when you replay the modes, as more often than not, you missed at least one thing in your first playthrough. I know for me, while I'll never not be loyal to Hammer as my favorite copy ability, the wheel copy ability that's introduced here was always a treat. Multiplayer or not, the first time you discover that you can physically ride the wheelie helper was the best. At the end of the mode, once you fight the titular Dynablade, complete with a new theme if you're playing Superstar Ultra, the mode gets a heartwarming ending as Kirby helps her raise her chicks. It's a pretty good start to the game overall, the secret stages in Dynablade granting access to every copy ability just in case you want some more practice. Next in line following Dynablade, there's Great Cave Offensive, otherwise known as the mode that kept an uncountable amount of save files from reaching 100%. Taking place in a series of interconnected areas that are all part of a massive cave, Great Cave Offensive can actually be beaten pretty easily if you speed through it all. It's collecting each of the 60 treasures hidden in the cave that becomes quite the challenge the further in you get. Compared to the first two modes, which are pretty similar to each other, Great Cave Offensive breaks the mold a fair amount. Like I said, the mode can be linear if you breeze through the stages, but considering that you'll more than likely miss a couple treasures along the way, you can easily go back through areas to find what you missed. That being said, this isn't a mode I'd recommend tackling all in one go, because especially if it's your first time playing, some parts of the cave require more trial and error than others. At first, things aren't that bad, the only puzzle in the beginning section that I remember ever giving me trouble being the series of buttons you need to press to get some hidden treasure. Granted, you can get it fairly easy if you utilize the wing copy ability that's given to you close by, but I remember sucking at the timing when I was younger. In the next area, things are pretty straightforward if you're thorough. After all, taking the wrong path here is still worth it for all the treasure there is to get. Outside of that, the theme of this part is one of my favorites out of all of the music in Superstar's levels. I've always loved how adventurous this one is. Now that you've become accustomed to Great Cave Offensive's gameplay, however, it's time for quite possibly the hardest segment in all of Superstar, the Old Tower. Thankfully made optional so that hundreds of kids wouldn't crush their games, the Old Tower isn't hard due to some big strong fight hidden away within it, it just has some of the most challenging puzzles all concentrated within a maze-like layout. Going back through it now as an adult, things aren't so bad, partially due to me remembering a lot about it from all the time I spent here, though have fun if it's your first time. This exact segment is why I'd recommend not doing this mode all in one go, because the way the tower is structured, it only has two entrances to sections that are relatively on the lower end compared to all the stuff that's at the top. And at the top of the castle is where the real challenging stuff is, there being points where you can exit which take you outside the castle without a way back other than restarting the trek from the bottom. It's practically a rite of passage with this game to make that mistake at least once. Then in the puzzle that's caused everyone to backtrack, there's this treasure chest in the corner of the tower which requires you to have both a crushing and cutting ability to access. Now normally this would be a nightmare as there's only one source of hammer in the entire tower, except thankfully stone can do the job just as well. It actually works out better since you needed to get another chest right before that one anyways. Aside from that, the one that caused me the most trouble replaying the game was without a doubt this timing puzzle where you've got to reach a door before it closes. Any other time this wouldn't be a problem for me, except I just couldn't get the timing down. The devs knew what they were doing with that Sir Kibble placement, that's for sure. Regardless, as long as you keep track of where to get copy abilities like stone in the tower, it won't be as bad as it appears to be. Oh, and try not to die. There's nothing more soul-crushing than figuring out one of the puzzles at the edge of the tower only to then get sent all the way back to the start with a death. Getting to the final area, things return to their normal difficulty. I guess the only place that could be confusing here is the cloudy area, but as long as you pay attention to where the stars are in the clouds, you'll be fine. Hell, I actually really like that part in particular, since discovering new little pathways always felt like uncovering a new secret. All throughout the mode, the treasures haven't all been generic items either. For a good bunch of them, they're actually Kirby references or references to other Nintendo games entirely. Superstar Ultra even replaced a couple treasures to make room for more recent references. Having played every Kirby game now, it was pretty fun noticing new references I never picked up on when I played Superstar Ultra back when it came out. So once you get all of them, the mode wraps back around to the very beginning of the cave, Kirby leaving it from where he fell in. One interesting thing to note here is depending on how many treasures you got, the ending cutscene actually changes in length, which I always thought was pretty neat. After that, it's onto the mode most people probably know this game for in the first place. It may be a borderline minigame with how quickly you can complete it, but there's no doubt that the Gourmet Race is one of the most iconic modes in all of Kirby. Due in part to its fantastic duo of themes that back this race between Kirby and King Dedede, the Gourmet Race is always a blast, whether it's your first time or you're trying to beat your top record. In my opinion, as opposed to the rest of the main modes, Gourmet Race truly shines if you're playing with someone else, as it's always fun to see who has the better strats to both eat a lot and get to the finish first. While the first theme in this mode has rightfully received a ton of remixes over the years, I always thought the second one was a bit underrated. Apparently Hal does too, as semi-recently with Kirby Fighters 2, Hilltop Chase finally got its own remix after all these years. Though once you've had your fill of that, it's time to escalate things a bit with the Revenge of Meta Knight. Getting into the first of two modes which define this game in my opinion, the Revenge of Meta Knight heats things up by making this adventure timed, Kirby racing against the clock to stop Meta Knight from taking over Dreamland. There's just so many cool things to gush about here. For one, this mode actually has proper dialogue backing certain segments, the crew of the Halberd reacting to Kirby systematically tearing the Halberd apart piece by piece. It adds a whole lot more character to the mode and even made me feel kind of bad for the crew towards the end. Above that, the game design here is top notch, levels melding together as Kirby goes from nearly being defeated after getting shot off the ship to getting back with the help of Dynablade, a moment I always thought was awesome. Don't worry by the way, she makes cameos in future Kirby games, so the Halberd didn't kill her here. On the ship itself, Revenge of Meta Knight is the best mode for uncovering secrets since there's actually unique dialogue for most of them. No joke, while replaying the game for this video's footage, I accidentally stumbled upon a secret that I'd never known about after all these years. In another example, with Kirby's rematch against Heavy Lobster, finding out that you can both get the incredibly rare pain ability and use it to blind the boss was such a cool thing to find out on your own. I only wish fights had a bit more health so that you could see the effects of blinding the boss a bit more rather than killing it near instantly. In turn, after crippling the Halberd with a unique reactor boss fight where you've got to direct its own attacks back at it, the ship is doomed, all the crew leaving except for Meta Knight, who decides to have his fated rematch with Kirby. It's not the hardest fight in the world as it is still a Kirby game, but that doesn't mean it isn't still tense. After all, the music here, like in the rest of the game, is top notch, setting the tone for such a showdown. And after Meta Knight is defeated, Kirby's gotta make his escape. This sequence where Meta Knight chases you, even now putting me on edge with its crazy track accompanied with Meta Knight doing everything to impede Kirby. Maybe that's why I've always liked the Wheelie Helpers so much. So with that, Revenge of Meta Knight comes to a close. What a great cutscene to end it off on too. Now going into what was the final story mode in the original Superstar, there's Milky Way Wishes, this mode flipping the script through preventing Kirby from obtaining copy abilities from enemies. Instead, they can only be acquired through copy essences, which are hidden in each planet Kirby visits, much like treasure was hidden in Great Cave Offensive. The themed planets that serve as this mode's levels are great too, my personal favorites being the first and last ones. In terms of the first, the way the level changes seasons as you go through doors was always an interesting mechanic I wanted to see more of. Luckily, Hal once again knows what's up, one of the best stages in Star Allies featuring this mechanic's return. Then on the last planet, I just like how chaotic it all is, those minecarts always being a fun time. Well, except for the ones on the fire planet, those can go to hell. The rest of the planets are all good as well, don't get me wrong, but those two just always stuck out to me. And at the end of every planet is a boss that appeared previously in the game, my absolute favorite out of the bunch obviously being Computer Virus. I mean, come on, it's kind of the closest thing we've got to a Kirby RPG, why wouldn't I love it? For the plot of this mode, it's another simple one, Kirby going to see a wish-granting machine called the Galactic Nova to stop the Sun and Moon from fighting. Only upon summoning Nova, the little jester that told Kirby to summon Nova in the first place betrays him. In the ensuing fight, Superstar goes out with a bang, the shoot-'em-up segment in Nova serving as one big appetizer for the final battle. I swear, that fight always reversed the direction of its side-scrolling when it was least convenient. In the Marks fight, however, he goes all out, the track that plays here still to this day having a special place in my heart as one of my favorite Kirby songs. He may seem threatening with all the attacks at his disposal, but a couple quick hammer blows will put Marks out of commission real fast. So there you have it, the final mode of the original Superstar, the only thing unlocked from it being a simple boss rush. Except if you're playing Superstar Ultra, this is where the remake really begins to shine, since it has a total of 4 extra modes on top of what Superstar originally brought to the table. Starting on the left, there's the two that really make this remake what it is, Revenge of the King and Meta Nightmare Ultra. In Revenge of the King, it's essentially a harder version of Spring Breeze, consisting of harder fights, altered level designs, and even a few additions. Like before reaching Dedede's castle, Hal actually brought back Kabula from Kirby's Dream Land, bringing the mode closer to what it's based off of. Even Castle Dedede has become a proper stage again, only this time Hal decided to give this section dialogue in the style of Revenge of Meta Knight. I'll be honest, Revenge of Meta Knight still did it better, but I still enjoyed it here a lot. In fact, this is actually Bandana Waddle Dee's first significant role outside of a minigame. He's come so far. And if all of that didn't make this mode for you, its final battle will without a doubt, the DDD fight getting reworked from the ground up to become masked DDD. I know I'm becoming a broken record here, but come on, you think I'm not gonna praise the theme of this fight? This next to Marks and another fight I'll be talking about soon are standout songs for the entire Kirby franchise. It's the way the song is both upbeat yet still intense as Kirby and DDD settle things once and for all that make this fight so much better. It's a challenging one too. The electric fence surrounding the arena coupled with DDD's wide-ranging attacks creating a lot of ways for Kirby to end up cornered. Good thing is, there's a pretty clear opening after his massive spin attack, just don't let your copy ability touch that fence. Upon his defeat, the rivalry that started in the very first Kirby game is settled, for now, DDD taking the walk of shame with all his subjects in a cutscene styled after the one at the end of Revenge of Meta Knight. Oh, and speaking of Meta Knight, it's time for Meta Nightmare Ultra. Making its return from another Kirby remake, Nightmare in Dreamland, Meta Nightmare Ultra works similarly to its original rendition with a few notable additions. Rather than Kirby going through the game, it's Meta Knight instead, special abilities becoming accessible depending on how much energy you gain from slain foes. Throughout most of it, nothing really changes that much at all, that is, until at the very end when Meta Knight summons Nova. Unlike when Kirby did it, there's no Marks this time around, and when asked what his wish is, all he wants is a worthy opponent, thus laying the groundwork for a ton of future lore to come. Galactonite makes his debut appearance. Before Galactonite even attacks you here, the game lets you know he means business, his theme in particular going full metal. Like here, for this one, it'd be better if I show you. Jun Ishikawa always puts out top-notch stuff, though this one also remains a massive standout out of every Kirby game. The fight fits the song too, Galactonite's battle posing far more of a challenge than any other boss fight in the game until now. In essence, he's just a stronger Meta Knight with a few added attacks, but that's more than enough to catch you off guard and pummel you into the ground. Better hope you didn't use all your heals on the last fight. At least Galactonite gives you some enemies to gain some energy from. In turn, as Meta Knight proves its supremacy in this non-canon mode, that leaves us with 2 modes left. Though before I get to those, I'd be remiss not to mention Superstar Ultra's minigames. Also coming packaged with the 2 minigames from the original, Superstar Ultra introduces 3 new ones, only this time they're touch-controlled as opposed to controlled by the press of a single button. And like the original 2, these 3 all revolve around timing to a certain extent. Kirby on the Draw and Kirby Card Swipe are both neat in their own ways, but my favorite out of the 3 has to be Snack Tracks. Especially in harder modes, this one becomes flat-out chaos, with everyone playing hot potato with a bomb, all the while trying to make sure there's no bugs on Kirby's food. Rivaling that, Megaton Punch from the original is also a good time. I remember feeling so proud when I finally managed to complete its hardest difficulty. Now onto those last 2 modes, they're actually variations of Superstar's original arena, one being an arena for helpers and the other being the hardest mode in the game, the True Arena. Saving that ordeal for last, Helper to Hero is an interesting idea, I'll give it that. I always thought it was neat that the game let you try out playing as the actual helpers themselves, especially considering some of them play slightly differently to their corresponding copy ability on Kirby. Other than that, it's a smaller boss rush compared to the arena, the only surprise here being the all-new boss at the end, Wham Bam Jewel. Basically, it's just a harder Wham Bam Rock, some of its new attacks packing a punch if you're not ready for them. It's no Galactonite, that's for sure. And when you beat that, the only thing left to do is the ominous True Arena. Consisting of yet another boss rush, only this time with the game's new hardest fights, it's a serious challenge. Like many other things in this game, HAL has rightfully brought the True Arena back quite a few times now. It feels like each new iteration of it gets harder than the last. Luckily, if you're like me and are a student of the Way of the Hammer, the True Arena will take a couple tries at most. Though for this video, I decided to do what my younger self never even dreamed of and went through the True Arena without a copy ability. Man, I thought I was a master at this game. Boy, was I wrong. Future True Arenas are still harder, but without a copy ability, even this one kicked me into the stratosphere. The first half of it is manageable for the most part. The only thing you have to worry about there is not taking any damage to conserve your limited heals. It's when you get to the final 4 that I started to have some trouble. Out of them all, Galactonite is fittingly still the hardest fight for me, the speed of his attacks rarely granting any openings when a star is even made available. Well, unless you get lucky and he spams the tornado. And in the final fight of the game, Superstar Ultra breathes new life into Marx. Following his non-canon absorption of the destroyed Nova, Marx becomes Mark's Soul, a boss which, as I've noted in another video of mine, is one of the first instances of Kirby utilizing pause screen lore. While as a kid he was the bane of my existence, usually due to me not saving nearly enough heals for the end, as an adult, Mark's Soul is still pretty hard. I'm sure everyone has been caught off guard by that energy attack at least once. It's all a fair bit unnerving too, that pain attack where his laugh echoes all around you, showing clearly that he's lost it. Also, on a side note, can we just appreciate Marx's design here? They straight up said, what if we add more Chester, and it turned out great. Then, if after an afternoon's worth of attempts you finally manage to beat Mark's Soul, in this situation nobody wins, because Mark's Soul is taking your hearing with him. If there's one thing I'll never be able to forget about this game, it's that ear-piercing scream etched into my mind. I know I'm not the only one either, though there you have it. If you've completed everything else, that's Kirby Superstar Ultra. As a reward for losing half of your hearing, there's some bonus cutscenes, that bloopers one definitely being way more funny to me when I was younger than it is now. Taking a retrospective look at the overall game, Superstar Ultra marked a pretty important point in the Kirby franchise. Its director for one, Shinya Kumazaki, had just become the director of the entire Kirby series, many of his decisions like including said pause screen lore becoming a series staple in future games. It's only fitting that in his directorial debut, he was tasked with remaking Sakurai's magnum opus in terms of the 2D Kirby games he'd made, and honestly, I think he did a splendid job. Everything that made the original Superstar great was left perfectly intact in Ultra. The only modifications made there were graphical improvements, a few new tracks, FMV cutscenes, and in general ironing out any kinks from the original, not to mention all the new stuff added. As if the original Superstar wasn't already packed with content, its remake truly deserves the title of Ultra. Hell, this game's worth it purely due to it creating Galactonite. You cannot deny that he's still one of the coolest Kirby fights ever created. It says a lot that even after I've played this game all the way through multiple times over the years, playing it again for this video was still just as fun as ever. In an even broader sense, Kirby Superstar Ultra is what most remakes should strive to be like, modernizing an older game with new technology and adding just enough to it for it to be its own thing. If you've been keeping up with me, then I'm sure you already know that I've been working on a Metroid lore video for a few months now. Good news is, I'm nearly ready to start writing it. The only thing left to do is for me to play Metroid Dread, so like I did with Fusion and Prime, I'll be streaming my first playthrough over on my Twitch tomorrow at 8 PM EST. Do stop by. And now, to those who've continued to help out the channel, I'd like to give a heartfelt thank you to Ali Elman, Cognitive Dissonance, and everyone else who decided to contribute. You guys are the best. If you want to help me continue making more videos like these, and receive a special thank you amongst a lot of other bonus stuff, do check out my Patreon, link in the description. It feels good to be talking about Kirby here again. Let me know if you'd like to see me talk about more Kirby games. Along with Final Fantasy, it's always been one of my favorite series, and considering I've played all of them, I could easily cover more Kirby. So that being said, I'm the RPG Monger, and don't forget that each and every one of you are fantastic.